Jake paced nervously outside the medical center delivery room while Kira's family arrived from the Zephyrian homeworld. The pregnancy had progressed faster than anyone expected, and after only 6 months, the babies were ready to be born. Park had assured him this was normal for hybrid pregnancies, but nothing about this situation felt normal to Jake. The first to arrive was Kira's mother, Velandra, a towering figure even by Zephyrian standards. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, and her crystalline skin showed the deep blue patterns that indicated advanced age and wisdom among her people. Behind her came Kira's father, Zephaniah, who carried himself with the quiet dignity of a former military commander. "Greetings, Jake Harrison," Velandra said in her formal tone. "We have traveled far to witness the birth of our hybrid grandchildren." Jake shook her hand carefully, still getting used to the way Zephyrian's skin felt cool and smooth like polished stone. "Thank you for coming. Kira will be so happy to see you." "How is our daughter managing the birth process?" Zephaniah asked with concern in his voice. "Better than I am," Jake admitted. "She's been calm and excited all day. I'm the one who's been panicking." Velandra's glow softened with what Jake had learned was Zephyrian amusement. This is common among new fathers of all species. The mothers do the difficult work while the fathers worry uselessly. Dr. Park emerged from the delivery room with a huge smile on her face. "Jake, you can come in now. Your children are here." Jake's heart pounded as he followed Dr. Park into the room. Kira lay on the medical bed, looking tired but radiant. Her skin glowed with the soft golden light of deep happiness, and she held 3 small bundles in her 4 arms. "My beloved Jake," she said softly, "come meet our children." Jake approached, carefully, hardly daring to breathe. The babies were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. They looked mostly human, but with subtle differences that showed their Zephyrian heritage. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality, and their eyes were larger than normal human babies. Most remarkably, all 3 were awake and alert, looking around the room with obvious intelligence. "This is our daughter," Kira said, lifting the first bundle. "I would like to name her Amy, as is the human custom." The baby girl looked directly at Jake with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a newborn. When he reached out to touch her tiny hand, she grasped his finger with surprising strength. "And this is our first son," Kira continued, showing him the second baby. "I chose the name Marcus." Marcus turned his head toward the sound of Jake's voice and made a soft cooing sound that somehow seemed more complex than normal baby noises. "Our second son will be called Alex," Kira said, presenting the third child Dot as soon as Alex was brought closer to his siblings. All 3 babies turned toward each other. Their eyes seemed to focus and unfocus in a synchronized pattern that made Jake think they were somehow communicating. "Are they talking to each other?" Jake asked in wonder. Dr. Park nodded excitedly. "We've been monitoring their brain activity since birth. The neural connection between them is stronger than we predicted. They appear to be sharing thoughts and emotions." Jake carefully took Amy in his arms, marveling at how light and perfect she felt. As soon as he held her, Marcus and Alex both turned to look at him with obvious interest. "They know you're their father," Kira said with pride. "They have been aware of your presence throughout the pregnancy." Velandra and Zephaniah entered the room and immediately began the traditional Zephyrian blessing ceremony for new children. They sang in harmonious tones that seemed to resonate through the room, and Jake was amazed to see that all 3 babies became very calm and focused during the singing. "They respond to our ancestral music," Velandra observed with satisfaction. "This is a good sign that they will maintain connection to their Zephyrian heritage." Over the next few days, Jake discovered that caring for triplets was both easier and harder than he had expected. The babies did indeed coordinate their schedules, sleeping and feeding at the same times. When one became upset, the others would make soothing sounds that seemed to calm their sibling down. But they also grew at an astonishing rate, both physically and mentally. By the time they were 2 weeks old, Amy, Marcus, and Alex were already showing signs of advanced development. They could hold their heads up steadily, their eyes tracked movement across the room, and they responded to their names with obvious recognition. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Park told Jake during one of their regular checkups. "Most human babies don't show this level of awareness until they're several months old." Jake was beginning to understand what Kira had meant about their children being special. At 1 month old, the babies were trying to roll over and making complex vocalizations that sounded almost like attempts at language. The scientific community took notice quickly. Researchers from Earth's top universities requested permission to study the children's development, and the Zephyrian Science Council sent a delegation to observe their progress. "We must be careful," Kira warned Jake one evening as they watched the babies playing together in their shared crib. "Too much attention could be harmful to their development," Jake agreed. Already, reporters were trying to get interviews, and government officials were asking questions about the children's future citizenship status. Both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld wanted to claim them as citizens. "Maybe we should move somewhere quieter," Jake suggested. "Somewhere they can grow up normally despite their abilities." "Where would be normal for children like ours?" Kira asked practically. "They will always be unique. Our job is to help them understand their gifts and use them wisely." As if responding to their conversation, all 3 babies turned to look at their parents and made synchronized cooing sounds that almost sounded like agreement. "I think they understand us," Jake said in amazement. "Of course they do," Kira replied. "They have been listening to our conversations since before birth." Their minds develop much faster than their bodies. By 3 months old, the children were sitting up on their own and showing interest in books and educational toys. They seemed to learn by watching each other, so when one baby figured out how to manipulate a toy, the others would immediately know how to do it too. Jake found himself constantly amazed by their development. Amy showed particular interest in anything mechanical, taking apart and reassembling toys with remarkable skill. Marcus was drawn to music and would hum complex melodies that he seemed to create spontaneously. Alex appeared fascinated by languages, babbling in what sounded like attempts at both English and Zephyrian. "They're going to need special education," Jake realized. "Normal human schools won't be able to challenge them appropriately." Kira nodded. "My parents have suggested bringing tutors from both worlds to create a custom learning program." "That's a good idea," Jake agreed. "We want them to be challenged, but not overwhelmed." As Jake tucked the children into their cribs that night, he reflected on how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been worried about having one normal baby. Now he was the father of 3 extraordinary children who would probably change the relationship between humans and aliens forever. Amy grabbed his finger as he bent to kiss her goodnight, and for a moment, Jake could have sworn he felt a wordless message of love and trust flowing from her mind to his. "Sleep well, little ones," he whispered. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what amazing things you're going to learn next." All 3 babies closed their eyes at the same time, settling into sleep with the synchronized breathing that had become their normal pattern. Jake looked at Kira, who was glowing softly with contentment. "You were right," he said quietly. "Our family is more wonderful than I ever imagined." 3 months later, Jake sat in Dr. Lisa Park's medical office, staring at a scan image that made absolutely no sense to him. The screen showed what looked like 3 distinct shapes floating in a dark space, each one glowing with a soft light that pulsed in a steady rhythm. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Jake asked, his voice sounding strange and distant in his own ears. Dr. Park smiled patiently. "You're going to have triplets, Jake. 3 babies. All healthy, all developing normally, but definitely 3 separate individuals." Jake felt the world tilt sideways. The room seemed to spin, and he gripped the arms of his chair to keep from falling over. 3? But we only tried for 1. Well, maybe 2. We agreed on starting small. "Biology doesn't always follow our plans," Dr. Park said gently. "This is actually quite remarkable. Human-Zephyrian hybrid pregnancies are extremely rare, and we've never seen triplets before." The medical team is very excited about this development. Excited? Jake's voice cracked. I can barely handle the idea of one baby, and now you're telling me there are 3 of them. Dr. Park leaned forward with concern. Jake, are you feeling all right? You look very pale. Jake tried to stand up, but his legs felt like rubber. The room spun faster, and dark spots appeared at the edges of his vision. I think I need to sit down, he mumbled. Just before everything went blacked out when Jake woke up, he was lying on the medical examination table with Dr. Park checking his pulse. Kira was standing beside him, her 4 hands gently touching his forehead and arms. Her crystalline skin glowed with the bright golden light that appeared when she was extremely happy. My beloved Jake, she said softly, you have awakened. What happened? Jake asked, his head still feeling fuzzy. You fainted, Doctor. Park explained. Quite understandable, really. Learning you're having triplets is a big shock. The memory came flooding back, and Jake felt dizzy again. 3 babies. Oh no, what are we going to do? Kira's glow became even brighter. We are going to celebrate, my dear husband. This is wonderful. News. 3 children at once is a blessing from the cosmic forces. Jake stared at her. A blessing? Kira, we can barely afford the preparations for 1 baby. 3 is going to be impossible. Nonsense, Kira said firmly. This proves that the universe approves of our union. When the cosmic forces bless a couple with multiple children, it means they are meant to have a large family. Dr. Park cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. These aren't ordinary hybrid pregnancies. The babies are developing at an accelerated rate, but they're also showing some very unusual characteristics. What kind of characteristics? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Their brain activity is off the charts. Much higher than normal human babies, and even higher than typical Zephyrian infants. They seem to be communicating with each other while still in the womb. Jake felt another wave of dizziness. Communicating? How is that possible? We're not entirely sure, Dr. Park admitted. But the scans show synchronized neural activity between all 3 babies. When one becomes active, the others respond. It's like they're already aware of each other. Kira clapped her hands together with delight. This is even more wonderful than I had hoped. Our children will have the deep bond that comes from sharing their first experiences together. Is this normal for Zephyrian pregnancies? Jake asked. Weekly, multiple births are common among my people, Kira said. But 3 at once is special. It usually indicates that the children will have enhanced abilities. Dr. Park nodded. That matches what we're seeing in the scans. These babies are developing capabilities that exceed both parent species. We're documenting everything because this could be significant for understanding human-alien hybrid development. Jake tried to process this information. So not only are we having 3 babies instead of 1, but they're going to be super intelligent aliens who can talk to each other telepathically? That's a simplified way to put it, but essentially yes, Dr. Park confirmed. Jake put his head in his hands. This is not what I signed up for. Kira sat on the edge of the examination table and gently touched his shoulder. My beloved, this is exactly what you signed up for when you married me. You knew our children would be unique. I thought they'd be unique like having 2 different cultures to learn from, Jake said. Not unique like having superpowers. These are not superpowers, Kira corrected. They are gifts. Our children will be bridges between our peoples, helping humans and Zephyrians understand each other better. Dr. Park looked thoughtful. Actually, Jake, this development might solve some of your concerns about managing multiple children. If the babies can communicate with each other from birth, they might be easier to care for than typical infants. How do you figure that? Well, they'll be able to comfort each other, coordinate their sleep and feeding schedules, and potentially even help each other learn and develop. It's like having built-in babysitters. Jake wasn't sure if this made him feel better or worse. What about when they get older? 3 super intelligent children who can communicate telepathically sounds like a recipe for trouble. Kira laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. Or it could be a recipe for amazing achievements. Imagine what they could accomplish working together. Dr. Park nodded enthusiastically. The potential is incredible. We're already seeing interest from the Galactic Science Council. They want to study the children's development to better understand hybrid genetics. Study them? Jake's protective instincts suddenly kicked in. Like laboratory experiments? Nothing invasive, Dr. Park assured him quickly. Just observation and documentation. This could be groundbreaking research that helps other human alien couples in the future. Jake looked at Kira, who was practically glowing with excitement. Are you okay with our children being studied? If it helps other families like ours, then yes, Kira said. But only if the children are treated with respect and given normal, happy lives. Of course, Dr. Park agreed. The research would be conducted alongside their normal development, not instead of it. Jake took a deep breath and tried to wrap his mind around everything that was happening. 3 babies instead of 1, accelerated development, enhanced abilities, telepathic communication, and scientific interest from across the galaxy. It was overwhelming. What do we do now? He asked. Now we prepare, Kira said practically. We need to find a larger living space, acquire 3 times as much baby equipment, and study everything we can about raising hybrid children. And we need to inform both our governments, Dr. Park added. This pregnancy is going to attract attention from Earth Command and the Zephyrian Council. They'll want to ensure the children are protected and properly supported. Jake nodded slowly. So our private family matter is about to become a public diplomatic issue. In a way, yes, Dr. Park confirmed. But that also means you'll have resources and support that most parents don't get. Kira squeezed Jake's hand. We will manage this. Together, my beloved. These children are meant to be born, and we are meant to be their parents. Jake looked at the scan image again, seeing the 3 glowing shapes that would soon be his children. Despite his fears and concerns, he felt a strange sense of pride and excitement beginning to grow alongside his panic. 3 babies, he said softly. 3 special, amazing, terrifying babies. 3 perfect babies, Kira corrected. Our family is going to be more wonderful than we ever imagined. Jake squeezed her hand back. I hope you're right. As they left the medical office, Jake couldn't help but think that his life had just become much more complicated than he had ever planned. But looking at Kira's joyful expression, he realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. Jake walked into the Space Command cafeteria feeling like he had not slept in days. The conversation with Kira had been going on for 3 weeks now, and they were no closer to a solution. Every evening brought another discussion about family, size, cultural expectations, and the future of their marriage. His friend Danny Martinez waved him over to their usual table. Danny was a pilot who had been married to his wife for 15 years and had 2 teenage daughters. Next to him sat Commander Lisa Park, the base's chief medical officer, and Lieutenant Ben Cole, who was recently engaged to a woman from Mars. Colony, you look terrible, Danny said bluntly as Jake sat down with his coffee. Still fighting with Kira about the kid situation? Jake nodded miserably. She's researched everything about human families, and now she's convinced that our entire species is doomed because we don't have enough children. Last night she showed me statistics about declining birth rates and asked me if I wanted to be responsible for the end of humanity. Lisa raised an eyebrow. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? Try telling her that, Jake said. From her perspective, having fewer than 10 children is basically child abuse. She thinks we're condemning our future kids to loneliness and psychological problems. Ben leaned forward with interest. 10 kids? That's insane. How would you even afford that? That's what I keep asking, but she has answers for everything. She's been talking to other Zephyrian families, and apparently they all pool resources and help each other. She wants to bring her sister's family to Earth to help us raise the children. Danny nearly choked on his sandwich. Her sister's family? How many people are we talking about? Her sister has 8 children and 2 husbands, Jake said wearily. Plus her parents want to come help with the grandchildren. Kira's been looking at bigger apartments that could house 20 people. 20 people? Lisa looked shocked. Where would you put them all? She's been designing plans for converting 3 apartment units into one big family complex. She showed me blueprints last night. It looked like a space station schematic. The 3 friends exchanged glances. Danny was the first to speak. Jake, you know we support you, but this is getting out of hand. Maybe you need to put your foot down. I tried that, Jake said. 2 days ago, I told her we were starting with 1 child, period. She packed her bags and said she was going back to the Zephyrian homeworld because she couldn't be part of a family that would damage its children through neglect. She was bluffing, Ben said confidently. No, she wasn't. She booked passage on a transport ship. I had to practically beg her to stay and talk about it more. Lisa stirred her coffee thoughtfully. You know, from a biological standpoint, her concerns aren't entirely unreasonable. Humans evolved in tribal groups where children grew up with many siblings and cousins. Our modern small family structure is historically very new. Jake stared at her. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides, Lisa said quickly. I'm just saying that both perspectives have merit. Maybe there's a middle ground. That's what I've been trying to find, Jake said. But every compromise. I suggest she finds a reason why it won't work. I suggested 3 children. She said that's too few for proper social development. I suggested we start with 2 and see how it goes. She said that shows I'm not committed to the family. I suggested we adopt some children instead of having them all naturally. She said adopted children need even more siblings for emotional support. Danny shook his head. She's got an answer for everything, doesn't she? Always, Jake confirmed. And the worst part is, some of her arguments actually make sense. I was an only child, and I was pretty lonely growing up. I did have trouble making friends and working in groups. Maybe if I'd had brothers and sisters, I would have been more socially skilled. Or maybe you would have been completely overwhelmed. And stressed out, Ben pointed out. My brother grew up in a family of 6 kids, and he said it was chaos. Never any peace. Never any individual attention from parents. Constant fighting over resources. Jake felt a spark of hope. Really? What else did he say? He said the older kids ended up raising the younger ones because the parents couldn't handle everyone. He was basically a third parent by the time he was 12. He swore he'd never have more than 2 kids because he remembered how hard it was. This was exactly the kind of information Jake needed. Would he be willing to talk to Kira? Maybe if she heard from someone who actually lived in a large family. I can ask him, Ben said. But I should warn you, he's pretty bitter about it. He might not present the most balanced view. Lisa nodded. That's a good point. You need to be careful about only showing her negative examples. That could backfire and make her more determined to prove that Zephyrian large families are different. Jake thought about this. What if we found families that were happy with different sizes? Maybe she could talk to people who chose various numbers of children and hear about their experiences? That's a better idea, Danny agreed. My wife could talk to her about managing 2 teenagers. It's not always easy, but it's not impossible either. And I could introduce her to Dr. Martinez in the psychology department, Lisa suggested. He specialized in family dynamics and could explain the research on different family structures without being biased toward any particular size. Jake felt more hopeful than he had in weeks. You think she'd listen to outside experts? She might, Lisa said. She's clearly someone who values research and evidence. If you present her with balanced information from credible sources, she might be more open to compromise. That evening, Jake approached Kira with his new strategy. She was in their living room, surrounded by data pads and holographic displays showing family planning charts, nutritional requirements for large families, and architectural plans for expanded living spaces. Kira, I've been thinking about our discussions, he began carefully. I want to understand your perspective better, but I also want you to understand mine. She looked up from her work, her glow brightening slightly. I would welcome this, my beloved. I've arranged for us to talk. To some experts and families with different experiences. Would you be willing to hear their perspectives? Kira considered this. If these people have wisdom about family structures, yes, I will be honored to learn from them. Good, but I want you to promise me something. After we've talked to everyone and gathered all the information, we'll sit down together and find a compromise that works for both of us. What kind of compromise? Jake took a deep breath. I can't promise you 10 children, Kira, but I can promise you that we'll have more than the 1 or 2 I originally suggested. If we start with 3 children and manage well, we can consider having more. Kira's glow flickered as she processed this. 3 children is still very few by my people's standards. But it's more than most human families have, Jake pointed out. And if our first 3 children are happy and healthy, and we're managing well, we could talk about having more. How many more? I don't know yet. Maybe 5 or 6 total. Maybe more if we find a way to make it work. Kira was quiet for a long moment. You would truly consider 6 children? If we can find a way to make it work for everyone involved, yes. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. This is still fewer than I had hoped, but it is more than I feared you would accept. I am willing to explore this possibility. Jake felt a huge wave of relief. So we'll talk to the experts and families, gather information, and then make a decision together. Yes, Kira said, turning back to him. But I have one condition. What's that? If we do decide to have 6 children, I want to document everything. I want to prove to both our peoples that human Zephyrian families can be successful and happy. This could be important for future couples like us. Jake smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. For the first time in weeks, they embraced without the weight of their argument hanging between them. They still had a lot to figure out, but at least they were working together toward a solution instead of against each other. Jake woke up the next morning with a massive headache and found Kira already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her personal datapad in her hands. Her crystalline fingers moved rapidly across the screen, and her inner light pulsed with the focused intensity she showed when deeply researching something important. Good morning, he said cautiously, unsure if their argument from the night before had been resolved or if it was still brewing. Good morning, my beloved, she replied without looking up. I have been studying human reproduction and family structures since before dawn. The information I have discovered is quite disturbing. Jake sat up in bed, already dreading what she might have found. What kind of information? Kira finally looked at him, her large eyes filled with genuine concern. Jake, your species is facing a terrible crisis. According to your own statistics, human birth rates have been declining for decades. Many human couples are choosing to have no children at all. Some are having only 1 child, which means that child will grow up without siblings. That's not necessarily a crisis, Jake said carefully. Many humans are happy with small families or no children. It's a personal choice. But how can this be a choice when it threatens the survival of your entire species? Kira's glow flickered with distress. On my homeworld, we learned that any species that does not maintain adequate reproduction rates will eventually disappear. Is this what humans want? Jake rubbed his face and tried to think of how to explain modern human society to someone whose people had never faced overpopulation, resource scarcity, or the economic pressures that influence human family planning decisions. Kira, Earth has over 8 billion people. We're not in danger of disappearing. Some humans choose smaller families because raising children is expensive and time-consuming. Others focus on their careers or personal goals. It's not about species survival anymore. Kira set down her datapad and moved to sit beside him on the bed. Her cool hand touched his forehead gently. But what about the children who do exist? I have read that many human children report feeling lonely and isolated. They struggle with what your people call only child syndrome or small family problems. How can parents willingly create such sadness for their offspring? Jake had to admit she had a point. He had grown up as an only child himself and had often wished for brothers or sisters. The loneliness had been real, especially during his teenage years when his parents were busy with their own careers. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Yes, some only children feel lonely, but they also get more attention and resources from their parents. And not all small families are unhappy. There are benefits to both approaches." "I do not see these benefits," Kira said firmly. "In large families, children learn cooperation, sharing, and mutual support. They are never alone. When parents die, the children still have each other. When difficulties arise, many hands make the work lighter." This is basic wisdom. Jake couldn't argue with the logic, but he also could ignore the practical realities. "Kira, raising 10 children would cost a fortune. We would need a huge house. Lots of food, clothes, education for all of them. My salary as a commander is good, but it's not enough for that kind of family." Kira's expression shifted to one of puzzlement. "But surely the government provides support for families?" "On my world, the community celebrates large families and ensures they have everything they need. Earth doesn't work that way. Parents are responsible for their own children's expenses. The government provides some help, but not enough to raise 10 kids comfortably." This seemed to genuinely shock Kira. Her glow dimmed as she processed this information. "Your leaders do not value children? They do not understand that children are the future of the species. They value children, but they expect parents to take responsibility for the ones they choose to have." Kira stood and began pacing the room, her forearms moving in agitated patterns. "This is even worse than I thought. Not only do humans have too few children, but their society actively discourages proper family sizes through economic pressure. No wonder your people seem so stressed and unhappy." Jake watched her pace and realized this conversation was going to be much more difficult than he had hoped. "Kira, I'm not saying the human way is perfect, but it's what I know. I grew up in a small family, and I turned out okay. Did you?" she asked, stopping to look at him directly. "You have told me about your childhood loneliness, your difficulties connecting with others, your tendency to spend too much time alone. Would these problems have existed if you had grown up with many siblings?" Jake opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right about his childhood struggles, and he had often wondered if having siblings would have helped him develop better social skills earlier in life. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean we can just decide to have 10 children. We need to be realistic about what we can handle." Kira sat down again, her glow softening slightly. "Then, we must find a way to make it possible. Perhaps we could move to a larger home, or find ways to increase our income, or seek support from both our peoples." "It's not just about money," Jake said. "It's about time and energy. 10 children would need constant attention, guidance, and care. How would we manage?" "The same way families on my world manage," Kira said simply. "The older children help care for the younger ones. Everyone has responsibilities appropriate to their age. The family works together as a unit." Jake tried to imagine their apartment filled with 10 children of various ages, all needing different things at different times. The thought made him dizzy. "What if we compromise?" he suggested. "We could start with 2 or 3 children and see how it goes. If we manage well, we could consider having more." Kira's glow flickered with what Jake recognized as frustrated disappointment. "You still do not understand, my beloved. This is not a matter of trying things and seeing what happens. This is about providing our children with the proper family structure from the beginning. A child who grows up expecting to be part of a large family will develop differently than one who believes they are part of a small one." "How so?" "Large family children learn to share naturally, to consider others' needs, to find their own unique place within the group. They developed strong bonds with many siblings and learned to work together. Small family children often become too focused on themselves and struggle with cooperation. Jake had to admit this made sense based on his own experiences and observations. He had always struggled with teamwork and had tended to be overly independent, sometimes to his own detriment. But what about individual attention? He asked. In a large family, each child gets less one-on-one time with parents. They get different attention, not less, Kira corrected. Parents provide guidance and love, but siblings provide companionship and learning opportunities that parents cannot. The family becomes a learning community where everyone teaches and learns from everyone else. Jake looked at his wife's earnest expression and felt torn between his practical concerns and her compelling vision of family life. He could see the appeal of what she was describing, but the reality of actually managing such a large family still seemed overwhelming. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Kira said, though her glow suggested she was not entirely pleased with his hesitation. But please remember that every day we delay is another day. Our future children must wait to be born into the love and family they deserve. Jake nodded, knowing that this conversation was far from over. As he got ready for work, he wondered if there was any way to bridge the gap between Kira's cultural expectations and his own practical concerns about family size. Jake Harrison stepped off the transport shuttle and breathed in the familiar air of Earth-based Station Alpha. 6 months on the Zephyrian homeworld had been successful beyond all expectations, but nothing compared to coming home. The diplomatic mission had secured a trade agreement that would benefit both species for generations to come. More importantly, he was finally going to see his wife again. Kirithis waited for him at the arrival gate, her tall crystalline form standing out, even among the diverse crowd of humans and aliens. Her 4 arms moved in the graceful greeting pattern of her people, but Jake could see the human smile she had learned to make just for him. Her skin shimmered with the soft blue glow that always appeared when she was happy. "My beloved Jake," she said in her melodic voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You have returned to me whole and healthy." Jake dropped his travel bag and embraced her, careful not to bump into her secondary arms. Even after 2 years of marriage, he still marveled at how perfectly they fit together despite their obvious differences. She was nearly 7 feet tall with translucent skin that revealed the flowing energy patterns beneath, while he was an average human male with brown hair and tired eyes from the long journey. "I missed you every single day," he whispered into her shoulder. "The negotiations were tough, but knowing you were waiting here kept me going." They walked hand in hand through the station corridors, Kira's crystalline feet clicking softly against the metal floor. Other personnel nodded respectfully as they passed. Jake's successful mission had made him something of a celebrity on the base, and his marriage to Kira had been the first official union between a human and a Zephyrian. Their quarters were located in the family section of the base, a comfortable 3-room apartment that Kira had decorated with a fascinating mix of human and Zephyrian items. Soft glowing crystals from her homeworld provided gentle light, while earth plants added green life to the space. The combination should have looked strange, but somehow it worked perfectly. "I have prepared your favorite meal," Kira announced, leading him to their small dining area. "I studied the cooking videos from your Earth internet while you were away." Jake's stomach growled as he smelled the familiar aroma of grilled chicken and vegetables. After months of Zephyrian cuisine, which was nutritious but bland to human taste buds, this was exactly what he needed. They sat across from each other at the small table, and Jake began telling her about his adventures on her homeworld. "The crystal cities were incredible," he said between bites. "But your people's council meetings are exhausting. They debate every word for hours before making any decision." Kira nodded knowingly. "This is our way. We believe careful consideration prevents future problems." "Did Elder Vextar accept the mining proposals?" "Eventually, yes. It took 3 weeks of negotiations, but we reached an agreement. Earth gets access to your energy crystals, and your people get our agricultural technology. Everyone wins. Kira's glow brightened with pride. You have done well, my husband. Your success will be remembered by both our peoples. Jake smiled and reached across the table to touch one of her hands. Her skin felt cool and smooth like polished stone. I couldn't have done it without everything you taught me about Zephyrian culture. Understanding the proper greeting rituals alone probably saved me from a dozen diplomatic disasters. They continued eating in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying being together again. Jake noticed that Kira seemed more thoughtful than usual, her inner light pulsing in the slow pattern that meant she was deep in thought. Is something wrong? He asked gently. Kira set down her utensils and looked at him with her large, luminous eyes. I have been thinking much during your absence, my beloved Jake, about our future together and the path we must take. Something in her tone made Jake pause with his fork halfway to his mouth. What kind of path? The path of family creation, she said simply. I believe it is time for us to have children. Jake nearly choked on his food. They had discussed children before, but always in vague terms about someday or when the time is right. He had assumed they would start slowly, maybe with one child to see how they managed the challenges of raising a hybrid offspring. That's wonderful, he said carefully. I've been thinking about it too. Having a baby would be amazing. Kira's expression shifted to one of confusion. A baby? Jake, I do not understand this word in this context. You know, one child. A little one. We could start with one and see how it goes. Now Kira looked genuinely puzzled. Her skin's glow dimmed slightly, which usually meant she was trying to process something that didn't make sense to her. One child? That cannot be correct. Surely you mean we should begin with the traditional number. Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. What traditional number? 10, of course, Kira said matter-of-factly. No proper Zephyrian family has fewer than 10 children. It is necessary for genetic diversity and family honor. I had assumed you understood this. The fork fell from Jake's hand and clattered onto his plate. 10? 10 children? Yes, though some families have as many as 15, if they are particularly blessed. My own parents had 12 offspring, and they were considered quite modest. Kira tilted her head, studying his shocked expression. Why do you look so distressed, my beloved? Is 10 not enough? We could certainly aim for 12 if you prefer. Jake's mind reeled. He had been thinking about the challenges of raising one hybrid child, dealing with the questions of which planet they would call home, what language they would speak first, how to help them understand their dual heritage. The idea of 10 children was beyond overwhelming. Kira, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said slowly. Human families usually have 1 or 2 children, sometimes 3. 10 children is, well, it's almost impossible. Now it was Kira's turn to look shocked. Her glow flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. 1 or 2? How can this be? How do humans maintain their genetic lines? How do they honor their ancestors? How do they ensure their family's continuation? We manage just fine with smaller families, Jake said, though he was beginning to realize this conversation was going to be much more complicated than he had anticipated. Quality over quantity, you know? Kira stood abruptly, her forearms gesturing in the pattern that meant serious concern. This explains much about human civilization. No wonder your people struggle with so many problems. You do not have enough children to properly distribute the family wisdom and responsibilities. Kira, please sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. Sut, but her glow remained agitated. Jake, I love you deeply, but I cannot accept a family of only 1 or 2 children. It would be shameful to my people and harmful to our offspring. They will be lonely and overburdened with expectations. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. And I can't imagine how we would manage 10 children. The cost alone would be astronomical. And the space we would need, the time, the energy. These are minor concerns, Kira dismissed with a wave of her hand. Love and proper planning solve all such problems. What matters is giving our children the large family they deserve. They stared at each other across the table, the remains of their reunion dinner growing cold between them. Jake realized that this wasn't just a simple disagreement about family size. This was a fundamental clash between two completely different cultural approaches to reproduction and family structure. "So what do we do now?" Jake asked quietly. Kira's glow softened slightly. "We find a way to bridge this gap, my beloved. We must, for the sake of our future together." Jake nodded, though he had no idea how they were going to resolve this. 10 children still seemed impossible, but the determined look in Kira's eyes told him she wasn't going to compromise easily. The evening that had started with such joy and anticipation had suddenly become much more complicated.